Welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week, we have a look at the 1958 film Missile to the Moon. This is episode 402. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be discussing it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it, so warning, spoilers ahead. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, publisher at Castlebridge Media, home of the Castle of Horror anthology. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts and Bars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin, Mr. Drew Edwards is the writer-creator of the long-running underground comic Halloween Man, which you can find at Global Comics. He is a Best Writer Ringo nominee, Austin Chronicle Best of Austin Award winner, and a member of the PEN America Fellowship. Say hello, Drew.
Hello.
Hello. And finally, also in Denver, color commentary from Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
Hello.
Hello. And I've got a cold. I'm sorry. I'm all stopped up. I sound like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So I'm just laying that out there. I apologize. All right.
And I'm laying out there that the law of Leto must be obeyed.
Fair. Totally fair.
Every time they said that, I always thought of the Steely Dan song, that starts down at the Lido, they welcome you. Anyway, all right. Missile to the Moon. It's a 1958 independently made American black and white science fiction film drama, whatever that means, produced by Marc Frederic, directed by Richard Cunha. Now, this is interesting. This movie was released the same week in a double feature with Richard Cunha's other film of that year, Frankenstein's Daughter, which is a very cool suburban sci-fi film with a female monster. This film, Missile to the Moon, was distributed by Astor Pictures. It is actually a remake of the Astor film Catwomen of the Moon. So this is kind of cool. Drew, you're the one who came up with that. We would look at it, and I think we should start with you for our opening thoughts. So Missile to the Moon, Drew, what are your thoughts?
This is a fun B movie, and I'm completely comfortable calling this a B movie. It's definitely something that was made quickly, cheaply in the play at drive-ins. But I love, I've said this before when anytime we've done one of these sort of rocket ship science fiction movies. We did Forbidden Planet a while back. This is not as beautiful as Forbidden Planet by a large margin, but I love the aesthetic of this. Like, I love the rocket ships. I love the cheaply made rock monster costumes. And I love the fact that the moon is apparently populated by buxom pinup babes in lycra outfits. Like, it's very much an aesthetic I enjoy. I know other people's mileage may vary, like their patience with this sort of thing is not going to be, it's not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. But for me, like, this is one kind of movie that puts me in my happy spot. Like, I like almost everything about this, and it's inoffensive. It runs very quickly, so like, even if you don't like it, it's going to be over before you know it. It's about the length of an episode of modern television, actually. So it's in one Black Mirror, and you're done with Missile to the Moon. So
that's really funny.
Yeah.
Wow. I by the way, do you think that this? We'll get back to this in a sec, but do you think that this would have played on Matinee at the Bijou? The old did you ever watch that show on Saturdays?
They tended. I don't think necessarily so, because much to my chagrin as a kid, they tended to play a lot more drama, and they always had a serial. But I was always just hoping for something like this, or Catwomen on the Moon, or some kind of rocket sci-fi, like as Drew described it. And they didn't show that as much as I would have wanted to as a kid.
That's a really good point.
I mean, it was an important show, and I wish I had my present sensibilities, because I think it was done really well. But there were times when I was a kid where I was bored by it, because I wanted to see, black and white B movies and monster films like Monster Theater, and especially after having watched a serial that was a Buck Rogers serial, or was it Gene Autry had one, I think.
Gene Autry had one called The Phantom Empire.
Yeah. So
where
after watching those, I was like, oh, well, I want more of that, but it rarely was.
Yeah.
So I just don't think they didn't show as many rocket ship B movies as far as I know. I'd have to look up. I'm sure there's a history of, a list of every movie that was shown on Matinee at the Bijou, but
I mean,
I
in
just
fact,
remember wanting Monster Theater and didn't get it. So
we should come back to this because I have some more thoughts on what we could explore about that, because there are like, where would you have found this actually? But hold that thought. Julia, what are your opening thoughts? Missile to the Moon.
It's I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. There are some cute parts, and I think it's clever, the idea that these escaped convicts would hitch a ride to the moon. Sure, why not? But mostly, I just kind of felt like it was silly, like there was, and not very inconsistent. Like there would be some horrible, traumatic thing that would happen, and then the next scene, everybody's fine, and they're laughing and smiling, and I'm just like, So
Uh,
I feel like it's not super well developed as far as the characters and the plot and everything go. But it's fun. I mean, it's definitely amusing. It's an entertaining hour.
Very good. Thank you. Tony, what about you?
I gotta go. I still like the movie, but it is full of the most undeserving men in the world going to the moon. Like not all these guys, just not
Yeah,
exactly the
it's
worst.
not the
Some of
right
them worse
stuff,
than others,
right?
but not maybe the worst, but up there. And just like, come on, man, and
I just want
just
to
let
highlight
them
that
decide.
I don't know if Jason or Drew said it, but it's not the right stuff.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to highlight that. That was funny.
But it does still. I'm on with Drew in the case that I think there's a lot of stuff where people were, it's done kind of fast and cheap, but there's a lot of stuff that's kind of done interestingly, or there are interesting ideas, and
It
it's
has a charm to it.
yeah, it's hard for
for
not to
sure.
be quaint in what we know how the moon actually works now,
Yeah.
right? But I like the fact, well, this cave has air, there's the rock, we don't know what creatures could be there, but rock monsters kind of make sense in a way, like
Yes.
silica based, or maybe carbon based but in rock form, however those things work, like that's actually like, we can't guarantee that the life forms are going to be humanoid. And I like Catwoman of the Moon as well, just because and I think it's, if I remember correctly, it's kind of not even as good as this in the traditional sense, but it also has a charm. But in reality, we all kind of know that it's an excuse to get pinup models into skimpy outfits because that plays at the drive-in.
Yeah, I mean, Catwoman of the Moon is this is a remake. This truly is a remake of Catwoman of the Moon. That's what's
Right.
amazing.
Yeah.
Is after just like something like 3 or 4 years tops, they decided, let's just do that one again in black and white. Still,
Yeah,
that's
it
the
is black
crazy
and white
thing. They're
still,
like,
yeah.
it's just literally, hey, we just did this a few years ago, but why not?
I mean, so sci-fi is selling. We have different costumes now. More I Dream of Jeannie-esque
Yes.
costumes,
Well,
and let's do that. And why not, right?
Yeah.
People, when I was reading about this movie online, there was a lot of people kind of aghast at how quickly that they remade Catwoman
Yeah.
on the moon for this. But again, what I think contemporary people always forget is there was no streaming, there was no home video,
Yeah.
there was no Blu-ray.
That's an excellent
Like
point.
movies came and went, and everybody now thinks like, remakes, but remakes have always been a thing.
Yeah.
So
That's a really good point. That yeah, you're right. Catwoman of the Moon had been like, whatever it was, like 53 or 54, but you weren't seeing it. It probably wasn't showing up even in the drive-ins anymore. So you may as well just shoot it. And by the way, this movie, and we can start talking about the plot. It is a remake of Catwoman on the Moon once they get to the moon, but Catwoman on the Moon starts out with a traditional space program kind of story where they are going to the moon and they land there. This
Right.
one comes up with, I have to admit, is actually a kind of innovative idea. We have a scientist named Dirk Green, older dude scientist who has been leading a private development of a spaceship, and his young partner, and I'm trying to think of the name of his partner. Oh, Steve. Yeah, his young partner Steve, Steve's fiance June. They're all hanging out around the ship, and into their lives come a pair of escaped convicts, named Gary and Lon. One is One is shorter and brown-headed, the other is taller and blonde. But they're two escaped convicts, and essentially they stow away, and for reasons, everybody winds up on the ship. So that's wild. That's totally different, like, and so instead of it being a boring, like, concept with no antagonists, you've got now this idea of criminals breaking into the space program and then
Well, it
being
gets
forced to come
even
along.
more interesting when you find out why he's actually made the rocket and everything.
Yes.
But also the idea of trapping criminals as like the government won't fund this, so I've got to get these two escape cons to help pilot the ship.
Yes.
It's
It's
but first
awfully lucky.
I'm gonna kidnap escape cons. That's fascinating.
There's a lot of kismet involved here because these two cons are smart enough, or as they say, what did they say? Canny or crafty or shrewd, maybe too shrewd, is the way that
Smart.
Yeah. I don't know if that bears
Smart and
out, but
shrewd.
okay.
they can, in other words, they can take directions. They can sit in stations on the ship and go through these elaborate, orders that the main guy is giving as they flip switches and stuff. They function pretty well, pretty quickly as a space crew with no training at all.
Well, except that the one prisoner is kind of rapey, but
Yeah.
Yes.
The worst.
So
Absolutely the
that's a really good. So that's okay. That's Tommy Cook, actor Tommy Cook, playing Gary. And as soon as they get into space and they realize that there is a woman, which is to say, June, played by Cathy Downs, that she's aboard. She is Steve's fiance. As soon as Gary sees June, he's like, "Well, I'm gonna get me some of that. I'm gonna try to rape her as soon as I can get her alone." And so,
And
and
it's really super easy, barely any convenience to get her alone, given
yes,
that I'm sorry, I shouldn't just dropping F-bombs, but he's like this escaped convict, and he's just like the guy, what's the main guy's name? The
Dirk,
captain, basically Dirk.
Dirk,
Yeah,
yeah.
Dirk is like, hey, can you go do this thing? And he's like, nah, man, I'm just here for the ride. I'm gonna lay on this bed. And they're like, okay, I guess we're all gonna leave then and leave you alone with this woman. And I'm like, is that smart and shrewd? Because I don't think so.
Well, I mean, I guess they're like, well, nothing can really happen because it's a tiny rocket ship, but it's still, I mean, it's big enough.
well, they know this guy is an escaped convict. Like,
That's
I
what I'm
guess
saying. He's the worst.
it's
They
all
should never
it's all
leave him alone
crazy.
with anybody.
Again, Julie, I'm going back with my previous thing where none of these men are deserving of any of the kind of good stuff. I mean, I guess
Listen,
Steve
when it
is
comes to
okay, but they're all not. The Earth isn't sending their best people.
the Earth isn't sending its best. They're criminals, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Maybe Steve.
But oh my god!
And that person gets hit on the head with a battery or something.
Oh my god! Well, what's really, by the way, Julia, you can drop all the F-bombs you want talking about rapists. I mean, oh my god! But what's weird is that after that happens, don't worry, I'm not jumping here plot wise necessarily, just about this topic. After escaped convict Gary, played by Tommy Cook, tries to rape June, played by Cathy Downs, nothing happens. Like, there is literally,
No, everything
they don't tie
is
him up.
fine. Everything's
Yeah.
fine because literally, like right after that, they let's see, how does the fight happen? Is that about June when they kind of break into a fight, or is it about something else? The guys are like fighting, and then they run into the meteor shower or whatever,
Right.
and meteor belt, and so then we lose Dirk. Dirk gets hit in the head, and he's dies. Dirk
And
is
then it's
dead.
forgotten after that. Yeah.
And then immediately after almost getting raped and losing their friend Dirk, they see the moon, and June is like, "I'm so happy," and I'm like, "Wow, dude, inappropriate emotions right now."
June's really good at compartmentalizing things.
I guess
We're
so.
Really, like,
I mean, that's
got
the
a good
only
head on
real
her
way you
shoulders
can
as far as-
excuse it, because like they're like, well, we have a job to do, so, and we just lost one person.
Maybe
Like,
all of the 50s was good at compartmentalizing. I mean,
I
don't
kind of
think so.
yes, I kind of agree. I think you're onto something there. I think there was a lot of
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but not just we lost somebody, but we lost the guy who built the rocket. So that could have turned out
The only
really
guy who
really
knew what the
bad.
hell he was doing.
Yeah, that could have turned out even worse. But
Yes.
everything seems to work okay because he's got an autopilot. I mean, he's basically got the Flash Gordon autopilot. Like it's gonna take us to Mongo no matter what kind of
Yeah.
thing, except for the moon.
Yeah. Well, and we will find. I suppose we should go. We jumped forward for the bizarre. And by boy, I should have put a content warning about that. Honestly, and I should put one in the description. You know that there's a discussion of sexual assault because I know that some people will be triggered by that. So okay.
It's should be said that while I'm not trying to downplay what happens, it's pretty tame by the way, like it's certainly not, you know, the way it would be in a movie now,
That
nor
is
is it
correct.
dealt
Yeah.
with like so.
Yeah, I mean
It's
worse.
very
worse.
much at a 50s TV
Yeah.
level. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
a Bonanza kind of thing. But well, no, Bonanza could get pretty dark. That's a terrible example. But a 50s TV level. So okay, and sidebar, we should
But
talk about how dark Bonanza can get. So anyway, they are in space, but between Earth and the moon, they run into a meteor shower. I can anybody here, like I'm, you know, I have a law degree. I don't know anything about science. Can you run into a bunch of meteors on the way to the
I
moon?
think there were
Asteroid belt.
asteroid. I think there were concerns that that's something that we had to watch for because you'll see it. I mean, we knew there could be such a thing, and I think it was one of the things. But also the thing is, what you really have to watch for, what we have to watch for all the time is micrometeors or
Mhm.
pieces like space debris.
Yeah.
And now it's to the point we have to track like screws that are flying around, and it's serious.
Yes, there's a satellite that looks
good-
like a hand, which I think
Yeah.
is hilarious. It's a glove. There's a satellite glove
Yeah.
floating in space. I find
But that stuff can tear through everything. There's a really good manga and anime series called Planetes,
Yeah.
and it's about junk collectors who
Huh.
basically have to sweep up all that stuff because it's become such a big
Wow.
deal. And one of the junk collectors has had this traumatic thing where a screw hits the spaceship that they're in, you know, a commuter ship basically,
Mhm.
and you know kills people, and that's his impetus for being part of the junk collector. But it's a thing that we have to do. But I think there was, you know, we kind of didn't know, you know, we knew that there were, you know, radiation belts and such. So it was one of those things of like, I think this could happen. Because you'll see it in various sci-fi films where they're, you know, having to what's cool though is we had enough technology to know like that could be a thing.
Yes.
That's fascinating.
That's
right?
a very good point. By the way, there was a TV series in 1979 that ran for a couple seasons called Salvage One that starred Andy Griffith, and he played a salvage operator who builds a private missile to go to the moon to pick up what would be regarded as army surplus, just to pick up all the shit that we left, presumably leaving the flag and bringing it all back to sell it back to the government. That's the plot. I have no idea how it went. I mean, I saw the pilot, you know. In 1979, I was not paying close attention necessarily.
I'm just sort of amazed that Andy Griffith, space captain.
Yes. Yes. Oh
That
my
could have
god.
easily been a Far Out Space Nuts kind of thing with Barney Fife as his
Yes.
wacky second in command.
Imagine a Star Trek parody with Andy Griffith as the Bill Shatner role and Don Knotts in the Leonard Nimoy part. Like I think that could
would be something.
Yeah.
Well, the amazing thing is it goes exactly the other way. It's you know, it's Andy with his you know, thick North Carolina accent, but he's just this. It's more like he's Ross Perot or something. You know, like he's gonna get this rocket built and he's gonna get to the moon and he's gonna make a bunch of money. That's the way it was presented. Except for he does work out of a junkyard, which is a much more colorful set than the actual Ross Perot working out of his office building. But anyway, back to 1958's missile to the moon. They encounter this meteor storm, I think they call it, which is kind of an interesting effect because I guess the rocks flying at the camera have volume, and they appear to have built a spinning wheel that comes towards the camera and then gets replaced with another one and another one. But they're probably only a few, so they keep repeating the same. But I believe that they're physical models that they're flying past, which is neat. It's a neat effect. That was cool. It's it's fascinating to figure out what kind of stuff that they'll come up with in all of these pre-computer days. I mean, like, Tony, do you remember in Escape from New York the 3D models that they are
Yeah,
indicating at the beginning?
it's a scene that they painted to look like,
Yes.
what computer graphics might be, which
It's a
is
wire
amazing.
model. It's a
Yeah,
wire model painted with
big glow
like
paint. I mean, glow in the
phosphorescent
dark paint.
green.
Yeah,
Yes. Amazing.
yeah. I mean, it would and way cheaper than if you tried to get time on a mainframe to do that work at the time.
Yes, it looks so real. That's the crazy thing. It really looks like a computer animated model. I just thought that
Yeah,
was
of that time
genius.
period.
Of that period, yes.
That's what I like. I was looking it up. Another thing that's impressed me is the kind of, this is a sidebar, but I was playing Alien Isolation, and what I love about the game is they kept the alien tech aesthetic.
Oh,
So the
yeah.
whole game is what 1979 thought the future would be, and the fact that they just kept that, it was amazing. Like, green text screens and all of that. Which, and
Yes.
I love when that is. But yeah, for this, it would have been nice, I think, knowing what we know, like how the meteors kind of tumble. It doesn't really, they look a little wonky, but
Yeah.
the idea of it, and like, it's done pretty well as far as like space effects go at the time. So
I always think of, like, if you look at the set that these guys are on. For one thing, the walls, which I don't know if they just didn't care or if they were trying to get at something, but the walls are clearly pegboard, like cardboard pegboard,
yeah,
like you would use
yeah.
for. And then they've got all of these controls, on these wooden units on the wall that are intended presumably to be metal, with all these dials and everything. Nothing is intended to be looked at very long. There's a lot of, like, in theory, I guess they're pressure gauges and just all kinds of stuff, but it's just junk that is that's intended to look scientific. That's there. I love it. I think, Drew, this is what you were talking about as far as this. I don't know what you'd call it. The 50s space aesthetic. Is this
Well, I
the
mean, a lot that nowadays the popular term is ray gun gothic, but
ray gun gothic? I love it. I
ray
love
gun
it.
gothic. But yeah, I like all this stuff. I like the way it looks. I don't care that it doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny
Yeah,
or
none of that
anything
bothers
like
me
that.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just fun, and like I want to make this stuff,
Yeah.
like Jason, you often talk about worlds you'd like to run around in. Like
Yes.
this is a world I would like to run around in.
Well, and Julia, a lot of the times when we encounter these movies, these, like, drive-in space movies, we're watching them through, like, Riff Tracks or MSD3K or something like that, where those guys clearly love these movies, but you're having fun with it, no matter what. So kind of it's part of the charm for to have all these silver outfits and everything.
Well, and I've always, I mean, since we've been watching movies with MST since the early 90s or mid 90s, I guess it would be, I can't watch a movie like that without kind of doing what they do, just the constant, even if it's not out loud, but the constant internal, cracking jokes and internal monologues of just, like I said, like whenever the rock monsters start walking around, I'm like, Gumby, rock lobster, just like yelling out
Yes.
stuff or whatever. So, but I think it makes it more fun, and it definitely gets you past whatever silliness there is. Just being like, oh, this is meant to be a fun thing to watch.
Tony, you have funny thoughts about that, and certainly we wouldn't do it in the movie theater, but, like, at home you
Speak for
would, right?
yourself.
Right. Oh,
Yeah, I mean,
yeah, go.
I go on the thing, like, I kind of, there were professional comedians making Mystery Science Theater, and what it has led to is a lot of not really funny people attempting to sometimes do that at theater, which isn't great.
Right.
But I don't know. I guess if you're at home, do whatever the hell you want. I don't know. And
I
I
get a
still
kick
like
out of
this.
it as long as it's not a serious movie. I actually get a kick out of it if people, not if one person's just constantly doing it, but every once in a while when you get somebody says something out loud and everybody laughs. I think that's fun. I think it makes it more of a community experience.
I can't I'm not on board with that. I'm not telling you what to do, but I am not. I'm definitely.
Well, I
That's
don't
not
do
my.
it.
That's not
I'm
my
saying I
theater. I
think
mean,
it's funny,
no. I'm
but
just saying. That's not. And I have been like. There's a few screenings I've been to where collectively everybody's kind of having fun.
Yeah.
And there's different levels, but I've also been to repertory screenings of like kind of serious movies that just are older and people act like jerks.
Oh yeah, no,
And
not when it's a serious movie, huh? But
that some of them are monster movies, but also the crowd at the last time I went and saw Godzilla 54 was just it was a
I
bummer.
guess the question is if they're being respectful of the movie and just making a joke that's funny versus disrespecting the work, because that's what I'm not talking about that. But for me, I get a kick out of it if somebody makes a funny joke.
There's such a fine line in that, and like I said, most of the people I've seen are not that. I would rather go see a Master Pancake screening where it's the comedians I know that are really like it's going to be really funny and everybody's kind of there to have a good time.
Yeah.
Laughing at the dramatic parts of Godzilla 54, for example, is not a fun time for me.
Yeah, I agree.
When the crowd's doing that. So I don't know, but I mean, this is a silly.
No, I think it's a really good thing to discuss. I mean, we watched. Now, I think at home though, I'm totally down with it.
Sure.
Probably not with Godzilla 54, but with this. Yeah, go ahead.
I grew up watching Mystery Science Theater 3000, but like every now and then I'll revisit it, but I'm mostly kind of over it. And I like even a movie like this that's like goofy or whatever, like I just tend to prefer to watch it by itself. And if anybody's gonna crack jokes, I'd rather be me in my head, or me in the comfort of my own room. But like I don't need that kind of commentary anymore. I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. I'm just saying personally,
that's kind of where I fall.
It's not my first choice ever anymore.
But but I mean, I also went to see Sisu recently, and everybody cheering when Nazis got destroyed was collectively a good time. So and that like there's an enthusiasm to a movie that I like to see with a crowd. But not necessarily in the Mystery Science Theater way.
Yeah,
because most people are not as funny as they think they are.
That's a good point.
Probably myself included. But like I know my humor, and I don't know. That's kind of. But I mean, I get, Julie, I get where you're coming from, and there are like screenings where kind of that give and take can be interesting.
Well, and you're going to movies in a college town, so it may, because doesn't happen when we go to the movies. Like we never people don't make jokes. So every once in a while when somebody makes a joke, I'm like, oh, that was funny. But it's not a constant thing where I'm like, I'm not constantly hearing that. So it's possible that if you're going to Alamo every week, then you're going to hear a lot more of that, and then it would get annoying. I can see that.
I mean, luckily I kind of know when to go, when not. Like I know when I go.
Sure.
So yeah, but I mean, that's my take on this.
Yeah.
But
that's cool.
I'm glad this was a really cool discussion, because I'll bet that the people listening, if anybody is listening to this, come to the Facebook page if you want to engage in this conversation and go into it, and because people are going to have perspectives on it. I personally don't really talk at all in a movie theater, but Julia and I, watching movies together at home, we chatter endlessly. We chatter all the time. I'm sure.
Of course, we do pause when we chatter. Like,
it would drive somebody nuts.
Yeah, we pause a lot.
That we're just constantly commenting on that. Oh, check that out. Look at that. A lot of times it's just drawing attention to different parts of the screen and stuff. So anyway, okay. So they land on the moon and decide to I should mention that unfortunately their captain, as Tony, you mentioned, the captain died, and so he's not able to go with them, but the rest of them land on the moon, and they immediately start to do some exploration. I do not remember if there is any dialogue to explain why they decided to get out and do an exploration outside the ship.
I mean, if you take a trip to the moon.
Yes.
I mean, you got to get a slice of that good green cheese, right?
Yeah.
So out they go.
Besides, how else are you going to learn if there are moon babes or not?
Exactly. It is weird to me. Like, this is not a movie where everybody. I'm trying to remember. Are they carrying pistols I can't remember if there are. Okay, so they got their
straight
pistols.
up.
Yeah, and there's even some dialogue about that. Right. They've got atmosphere suits, so they've got their helmets and everything. This movie does not bother to anticipate what gravity effects would happen on the moon, so they're just walking. They do speculate that the intense heat of the sun would be very destructive, and so you need to stay.
So I think that's what's fascinating about. Sometimes people have done more research or talked to the right people in ways that you don't expect on kind of B movies. Whereas you'll see modern movies where like computers can never do that. What do you? Why would you even put that? That's ridiculous. Like you've used a computer, right? Why would you put that in the dialogue? But here, there's speculation of like, well, there's no atmosphere, so the sunlight would just kind of pierce right through that and become this superheated, super dangerous thing where they have to live in this, creep around in the shadows. And that's actually like, oh wow, man, that's actually, there's some thought in that, and it's partially just to kind of create some tension, but
Yes.
pretty cool way to do that.
Yeah. And they've, there's truth to that, by the way. I mean, the sun on the moon would be extraordinarily powerful. It just so happens that the guys who went to the moon were shielded, by their suits. In this movie, the suit shielding is nothing. Once you're out exposed to the sun for more than a few moments, it will just burn you like an ant on a big
With their
piece of
magnifying
tinfoil.
glass. Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Which is why the rock monsters can survive. Can you imagine, like, if they like touched you or hugged you, they would just be superheated volcano rocks.
Right, like those guys on the Herculoids.
Gumby,
Yes.
damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
Like fiery Gumby. Yes.
Yeah, like we're not, they don't get that close, but one would imagine that if they're rocks, they would be superheated if they got close enough to you.
Oh my God, yes, they would burn you like hot asphalt.
Which
that'd be terrible. Yes.
Which you kind of want to see, like there's like a one of them, like if it was like the Hercules or one of them's like your friend.
Yes.
And so you get like a drawing of one of the Earth people, but he's roasting marshmallows over one of the superheated rock men, or like a pot of coffee on their head, and like holding some hot dogs. That's a campfire. That'd be amazing.
I love this idea of your friend, the burning rock monster, so that he can do all these kitchen duties for you.
Right.
That's pretty neat. Yeah. The rock monster. So they encounter some life. The first life they encounter are these great bipedal rock creatures that hide themselves in the rocks and come out and march towards them. In theory, I guess, to catch them and I convert them into paste that in some way they can absorb, I suppose.
We don't know though. They might have just wanted to hug them.
Or they might be wanting to warn them about the space
Yeah,
babes.
yeah, exactly. They're terrible.
Yeah.
You don't.
That's so true.
They kicked us out and we're okay with it, but you really don't. Please
They
avoid
could
the space levels.
They're moon racists.
Yeah.
The
What?
rock
Yeah, we
monsters
live
could be.
outside.
I mean, they could be trying to send psychic messages that nobody's psychic, so they can't hear them. They could be
Right.
just trying to.
We don't.
Yeah.
I mean, we really don't know. They shamble around, and the women on the moon, if I remember correctly, they do think that they're dangerous.
Yes.
But is it dangerous because they're dangerous, or again, they could be super dangerous because they're aggressive, or we just
Yes.
want hugs. It's not our fault. We're superheated rocks. I don't know. But there is a certain amount of danger to them, regardless, and we don't know. They act aggressive, and guns don't work on them. So
very funny. So anyway, the guys eventually find their way. I'm just trying to remember what the transition is between running from the into the cave.
Going to the cave,
Into the cave they go, and in the cave they realize that they've got breathable oxygen, and also that there are torches. Which means that there's a civilization hiding out underground / in caves on the moon, and so they explore more. Now there is another creature, and I'm just trying to remember if they meet the creature or the people first, because the other creature is the giant spider.
Which they had just around because they were for another movie they were making.
Yeah.
Well, it turns out this is the same moon spider that was used in Catwoman of the Moon. Like that's and I believe it was the writer who said that the producer wanted a spider, and
So he's like the modern day, like that producer guy who wanted the big mechanical spider.
oh yeah, that's right. There was a producer guy also who wanted Kevin Smith to have Superman fight.
No, he put that in. He tried to put it in everything, and eventually it landed in Wild Wild West.
What
But
the
it was
fuck?
originally made the spider for a tarantula in 1955.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
way.
And then
It's
it was
that.
in another.
That's crazy.
Although when you said Moon Spider and Catwoman, all I can
This
think
is
is Cat
a movie
Stevens.
star
Yes,
Spider.
movie
spider puppet.
Star.
It's
Spider,
it is.
yeah, it's in a
He
lot
gets
of
around
things.
this spider.
He's in the street. He's walking down the street, and people are like, "You're famous. Can I get a
Yes.
selfie?"
Okay.
I think it'd be really funny if it turned out that he had an accent, though. Like he was actually from France. He was a spider.
Oh yeah, yeah.
He was
yeah.
he had actually just arrived. He had his green card, and now he was landing jobs in Hollywood, and things are turning around for the big spider.
So I was picturing Cat Stevens Moon Spider. So I'm dreaming of a moon spider.
Moon spider.
You're forgetting the spider is from Mars.
Moon spider.
Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so anyway, everything on this planet can be escaped by walking away from it very quickly. To be honest with you, that is something that this movie. Look. Hey man, I don't make movies, right? So I could be getting all this wrong. But one thing this movie kind of lacks is a certain amount of tension. Like there's a curious.
Well, they have the
ambling-
tension opportunities. They just don't choose to have tension around them.
Right.
I think that's the difference. And I think, but to be honest, that's a lot of the difference between when you see a movie that you really enjoy,
Yeah.
and then a B movie that can be, it could be numerous reasons. We just don't have time, let's go with the first takes on a lot of this stuff, whatever.
Yeah.
But the difference can often be a person who had more time. I don't know if I want to use the word better, but a different director would have said, "Hey, let's turn this tension in. Like let's make this more like the tension in Fantastic Planet, or that anything like that." Whereas here we kind of get a more fluff we just move things along.
Yes. Right. Yeah, and
I meant Forbidden Planet. I don't know why I'm thinking of 3 different movies all at once.
No, Fantastic Voyage. By the way, Fantastic Voyage. Oh boy, we need to go back and do that one because you want to talk about something that also has its own very beautiful visual. I don't know, style all the way through. Fantastic Voyage for sure, and yes. But
what I said, I meant Forbidden Planet, but I had like 4 movies in my head that I wanted to kind of discuss. So like, you can have a movie that is a cult classic or maybe slightly B movies, and there's a difference in direction.
Yeah,
that turns it into kind of more where it's more of a drive-in kind of movie, as opposed to where it's really building those bits up. And I think that's often the choices. Those choices are what makes it kind of more B movie than anything else.
I agree. I agree. Okay, so they make their way to the civilization, and let's talk forward and back a little bit, because for one thing, taking a bird's eye view, this civilization on the moon is actually smaller than it should be. It's and the excuse, thankfully, the people writing it have had a little bit of imagination. They only want to show you about 20 people. So what they've said is that in theory, disease has been dying out, so the community that's left is a lot smaller than it could, and that also means that most of the men have died. And I think for the rest of it, we're just supposed to. This is Star Trek logic. The people we're seeing are supposed to represent, hundreds of thousands, I guess, more people that we're not seeing. Right? Am I getting that correct? And you don't have to jump at that. We can just presume that that's the case.
Well, I mean, I think something's happened civilization-wise that it's been a slow death, which is also partially why there are why they sent out the rocket to Earth to see, hey,
right,
what do we do next? Which
we come to find out that Dirk, the older scientist who was running a private space program, not unlike SpaceX, was actually doing it because he was actually a pioneer from the moon who had crash landed, had gotten stuck on Earth, and so now had pretended to be a scientist to build another rocket to go back. And it's taken him years and years. So long that the young lady that he was betrothed to, who was a child when he left, is now a grown-up in the second command in the organization on the moon. All of the things I just said sound a lot more interesting than the way it is actually presented in this.
Well,
But
my favorite thing about this whole part of it is that they think that the one guy, the other scientist,
yes,
the one guy is
Gary. No, not Gary.
It's him.
It's
Dirk.
The Steve, the
Steve.
Steve is Dirk because she's blind, and so she just knows that they've come back from Earth, and Dirk is the one who was supposed to come back from Earth. It just took him too long. So
So
she's like, well, obviously,
Yeah.
Dirk is back because he's got the medallion that Dirk had, and so because he has the medallion and they're visitors from another planet, it must be Dirk. But now that she's blind, she doesn't see him anymore.
Yes. And we should mention that Steve, played by Richard Travis, is not a particularly interesting character, but he is a very sort of standard American manly man of this era. You know, he's a reasonably handsome dude who looks like the star of a 1950s sci-fi film. I can't say it any better than that. It's just like Leslie Nielsen at the time, honestly. He made a hell of a lot of movies. I mean, he was very busy for a long time, and then after the late 60s, he retired and then died in 89 at 76. So a good long career. Anyway, we can just call him Hunky Steve, and he is betrothed to June. Anyway, he lands on the moon. They think he's Dirk. And the women of the moon immediately, the big problem dramatically for the rest of it is that they both want to get rid of the Earthlings, but keep this particular Earthling because, go ahead.
We skipped over the fact that he's not an Earthling. Because he was.
No, I'm not talking about Dirk. I'm talking about Steve.
Yeah, but I'm saying we skipped over the fact that Dirk was not an Earthling. That when Dirk is dying, he says, "I'm sorry, my Leto," and he has the medallion's like, "Make sure you bring this." Just, I think I don't know if that was clear.
No, I mentioned that. Well, maybe I didn't clarify it enough. But yes, you're correct. He had gone as a pioneer to Earth, and now he's coming back, and then he dies, and so they don't have Dirk with him, but they don't know that's important. Anyway, until everybody is looking for Dirk, and for the longest time, one of the reasons this is an awful lot of confusion for a fairly simple film, and that's either good or bad. But one of the reasons that there's a lot of confusion is that the quote unquote the Leto, which is the queen of the moon people, played by Cathy Stevens, is blind, and so she can't tell immediately by looking at Steve that he's not Dirk. And there's basically this power imbalance between Cathy Stevens as the Leto and Nina Barra as her second in command, Alpha, and that's where a lot of the that's where a lot of the drama will come out for the next 20 minutes of the movie, because it's not a very long film. So meanwhile, while they are arguing amongst one another for who will get to keep Steve, even after they discover that he's not Dirk, there is also the young dudes would like to find some ladies themselves. So brown-headed Gary, who already tried to assault June, decides he would like somebody else to assault, and so he grabs one of the moon ladies. I mean, willfully, she goes with him, and they go off together. I believe that Lon, who is the other guy, he also, the blonde guy, he also finds a young lady to run around with. I believe
but
she's
he's
the
trying.
one who helps. Yeah,
he's trying a little bit to. He's definitely less, hardened criminal.
Yeah, he's the good one of the two criminals. One is rougher and more violent and meaner, and the other is obviously one who's slightly more moral and upstanding.
Because Gary, he's like, well, I guess if I can't, rape an Earth woman, I'm gonna see if I can score with the Moon woman. And then he finds out, like, whoa, because you can't take the criminal out of the criminal, I guess. He's like, wow, diamonds are worth nothing, so you just have diamonds everywhere.
Oh yeah, and he's into the diamonds. Thank you for remembering that. Yes.
Yeah, so he's going, wow, hot babes and diamonds. This is gonna be great.
So isn't it funny
such a
how the
criminal.
movie goes out of its way to like go, hey folks, don't be a Gary. Don't be lusting after local women and only thinking about diamonds when there's a crew to look at. It's very moralistic, you know.
Right.
And also I'm wondering if is there, Julia, you're better at this analysis than I am. Is there is there a race thing going on here? And I say that because Gary is shorter and darker, and the nice convict is taller and blonder. I
I mean, I would say not race so much as just privilege. Yeah, the tall blonde guy is going to be the leader, and the more respectable one possibly. But maybe like there might be an ethnic prejudice if he's like kind of
Yeah.
Italian. I don't know.
Yeah,
yeah.
he's definitely of the criminal greaser type.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Right.
Like,
Thank you for saying that way. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. This
The
is
typical
before
Probably
In
white
Cold.
listens
man.
to rock and roll music and smokes jazz cigarettes.
I
Jazz
bet he
cigarettes,
does.
yes.
Yes.
I bet he does.
Well, what's funny, by the way, is these two guys remind me a lot of the guys in Cold Blood, but obviously they're not influenced by the guys in Cold. And in that one, you had two convicts, both who decide to go score take down a safe by breaking into a house and wind up killing a family. But you have one who's more of a shorter, smarmier meatball who is the one who's kind of guiding the other one around. And so it sure seemed like, but the thing is, those psycho pairs sort of work everywhere, because that also happened, with Columbine. It's just this thing that you see over and over again. One sort of has the other one psychologically in his thrall. Because I mention it because the In Cold Blood murders happened in 1959, which is after this movie came out. But they were so close in my mind to the In Cold Blood guys that I was just shocked to find out nothing to do with it. Yes, diamonds. Gary,
Her girl's best friend, after all.
yes. So I call on anybody here who knows anything about this. Can there be diamonds on the moon? Is that a thing? Like,
Well, of course. I mean, there can be all
It's
kinds of rocks on the moon. The question is why this guy would think that he might think they're diamonds, and then he brings them back, and they're like, "No, man, these are just cubic zirconia or whatever."
Right.
So
he's also thinking way too. I mean, admittedly, like this is the kind of guy he is, but he's going, like, if they successfully fly to the moon and back, like, he's going to be a celebrity. Like, he doesn't have to do all this.
Yeah, but
Like,
that's part of his thing. Like, is he going to be a celebrity, or are they going to try to put him back in jail?
Mm.
So he thinks he's on the one hand, he's like, "Hey, I'll come back famous. I've been to the moon." But also, again, they go out of their way to make sure that he's a criminal through and through. He's always thinking of the next hustle. So
Yeah.
he's going to hedge his bets, because and maybe he's being realistic too. But just because you're famous doesn't mean you're rich.
I suppose that's true.
Like,
Yeah.
that's definitely a truth. So he's on the, like, well, I'll come back famous, and then I'll have some, diamond money, moon diamond money too.
This is
Um,
that's true.
It could just as easily, like in a kind of moralistic Twilight Zone way, you come back with moon diamonds and they disintegrate in the
Yes.
Earth's atmosphere, and you're like, no. And they
No,
haul
it'd
him
be
into
exactly
jail.
that. Well, I just did some searching, and I found that we have found evidence, as Julia mentions, of cubic zirconia on the moon, as this person notes, showing that the universe not only has diamonds but its own fire-safe knockoffs. That would be the
Nice.
funny thing. You come back from the moon and
yeah.
you go,
None of this is
I
real.
found diamonds, and they go,
Sadly, for Rapey McRaperson, he burns up before he has a chance to come back.
yes,
I don't know if
unfortunately.
sadly's the word.
Here's
I know.
Sadly for him.
I'm kidding.
I
I
I'm
think
kidding.
that's the
I'm kidding.
movie ultimately punishing him for his
Yes.
behavior
Yeah,
And-
for a greed,
Absolutely.
actually.
in ways that none of the other characters decide to do for whatever,
Right.
except for
No,
Dirk.
I was being
Dirk
sarcastic.
does try to beat the crap out of him.
that's true.
Oh, I know,
Mhm.
I know, I know. I
Yeah.
just
So
It-
in
it-
fact, I think one of the rules of the
it
Hays
made me
Code,
think.
you have to be punished for your crimes. So
Right.
his death probably is a checkbox punishment for everything that's wrong with them, including like in a movie that it doesn't take place with a deadly son. You people do have a tendency to wander in front of trains. But in this, that's not necessary. His pants are full of diamonds, and now, as they're running away, the rock monsters are rushing towards him, and he has to get away, but he is laden with diamonds. And
but the thing is, you're
Diamonds in the
skipping
pocket
way
of his
ahead
pants.
because we also
no,
have
I know. I'm just
a full
but
on.
Yeah, we skipped past
Yeah.
the women.
we'll go
Yeah,
back.
That was my
We'll go
fault.
back. Don't worry. But I just wanted to get back for a moment to what happens to poor Gary, which
Yes.
is that yes,
Mhm.
he burns up because he cannot get away from the
Yeah.
lightning fast and deadly predator rock monsters.
The
But
Gumbies.
yes, okay. But yeah, what would y'all like to say about the women of
Well,
the moon?
they're
Civilization.
trying a few things. So we, because she's, smart, she's like, hey, I think you're being taken by these moon women. And also, maybe you should tell them you're not really, you're not really Dirk. Like, that's not cool. And for her troubles, she gets, tossed to the moon spider, on a cross, chained to a cross. And then also we find out the moon women can hypnotize people.
Oh yeah, they all have psychic powers to use on one another, which is hilarious.
But
They have like psychic
people are-
battles.
Yeah, Earth people are particularly. Steve in particular is susceptible because the whole play is, all of this kind of interrupts the power struggle that or gives a window for a power struggle where the Leto is killed and Alpha decides to take over and marry Steve. And he gets to wear a cool robe, and there's actually one of the longest sequences in the film is this dance sequence. But and also that's with all the moon women, which who brought us here was Selena Belke, who in the colorized version, I think she's the one in red, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember correctly.
I cannot remember, but you can kind of tell her because she is once again taller than the other women.
I think it was her in the red. If I'm not, I'd have to look at it again. It's interesting that there's a black and white and a colorized version, and I had actually a slightly harder time finding the black and white version. I don't think it's not preserved as well because they kind of cleaned up the colorized version when they colorized it.
That wait, you feel like the colorized is cleaned up versus the
a little bit or at least maybe there's a black and white one that looks really nice, but
yeah,
the black and white version I was watching was not.
I thought it was fine.
It was not as pristine.
Yeah, there is a one that they call colorized and renewed or something that I haven't seen yet, but go ahead.
It's fascinating though in the colorized when they decided to give the moon women like a blue tint.
Yes,
but I think that had to be. I think that was a colorized. Just they decided to do that because if you look at the poster for the movie, the original poster was like red.
Yes,
the moon women are just kind of flesh colored. They aren't blue on the poster.
Yeah, that idea, that insight of let's make them alien by their color. Yeah, that clearly had not occurred to them. And I was saying you could even go further now. Like you could make their flesh tone something truly bizarre. I mean, you could make it sparkly. You could make it constantly flowing with rainbow colors. I mean, it could look like something out of Swamp Thing if you wanted to. It just get super weird. But you were speculating that this colorization probably happened during the Turner movement of the 80s.
Maybe. I mean, there were ways, but it has that certain kind of Turner colorized look. I actually was looking it up and I couldn't find a good, I didn't dig super deep, but I was really trying to find, well, how does that colorization process, what was done? And I didn't find any real good answers on, kind of what era, what version of that colorization process was used. But it's interesting. They did it. I think they did a good job of like colorizing all their outfits and stuff and kind of making it. They do, when you see it colorized, I still like to see black and white movies as black and white movies, but they did go to lengths to go, well, we're going to color code the different characters as well, which was interesting.
Right. Their outfits. Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, I was just looking up a poster of Missile to the Moon, and there was a film that people confuse title-wise, called Rocket to the Moon. And this
Right.
should be interesting to you, Drew, because I've never seen this before. Maybe you have. It's a 1967 movie, but it's one of those films of that period of the 60s and 70s that does this retrofuturism so that everything looks both Victorian but also futuristic. And yeah, have you seen it?
I've seen that.
Oh,
It's
I've
been a
seen
little
this.
bit. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, I saw that, I think, when I was a teenager somehow. I haven't seen it in recent years, but I have seen it.
I've got.
Well,
I've
I got
got
on
to
the
see it.
kick of, like, I think it was probably Amazon before Tubi was,
Mhm.
you know, and it just was like, oh, do you want to see all of these B sci-fi movies? And I was like, of course I do. Thank you, Amazon.
Yeah.
Like, you can recommend all of them.
Yep.
And I'll watch most of them,
Yeah.
if not all of them, because I don't sleep. So there you go.
I mean, I think part of the reason why you saw sort of a like this genre sort of get a minor comeback in like the late 60s and early 70s is because we did actually go to the moon, and like the space race was a real thing. So
yeah. So yeah, I'm sure that I have been back and forth so much that that I've lost the plot. So is there how would you like to
That's what the movie said.
that's I didn't even understand that joke. But well,
The movie was back and forth so much that it lost the plot as well.
okay. All right.
It was not a good joke. So you're not to be blamed.
You have my appreciation. You're all right.
It was that's what she said, like a wraparound joke. It was not. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, gosh, that was
go ahead.
this
Continue.
This is the fun part. We could go through this reductio ad absurdum where we keep having to like further explain a joke. Okay.
If you have to explain a joke, life's not worth living.
You could also turn that into a skit, Jason, where you just seem puzzled at jokes that are.
That actually
really
is our
funny.
life. That would be a skit just of our life. Of him constantly
really?
going,
That
what?
chicken. Tell me more about this chicken. What? Can you? What is his reason for crossing the road? I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by this chicken of which you speak. Knocking on a door, you say?
Because I'm the official dad joke teller of the household, so
Gotcha.
that's our whole life right there.
Gotcha.
There is a you just quoted Dr. Katz there though, because there was this wonderful line from the guy in Dr. Katz where he goes, no, stop. If you have to explain the joke, life's not worth living. And we've both held on to that now for like 30 years. It is so true. So anyway, unless you go meta. But so yes, back to Missile to the Moon. Everybody ultimately is fighting over Steve, and the ladies are able to hypnotize one another. Please remind me: are there in fact male slaves, or is it all just women?
No, it's women at this point.
Yeah,
like,
there's no
male
male slaves.
Yeah,
I keep trying to envision that there were, but there are none.
No, Dirk was one of the last. I guess he was going to scout things.
You just want there to be a extra layer of pulpy kinkiness in this movie.
If there were male slaves in this thing, you know that they would be like wearing like Star Trek style mini skirts, basically.
Or like Flash Gordon Speedos or something.
Right.
The history of the world.
Yeah, I mean,
all
the women are wearing. Well, the main women who are the rulers wear crazy headdresses. Like the Lido is wearing a giant. I don't know how to put it. A sort of giant headdress with bells and snakes. Sort of. It's a really strange headdress. The reason they're able to get away, if I remember it correctly, is that among the two punks, the nice punk gets a girlfriend who will help them sort of break away, and she sort of sets off a chain reaction that causes the civilization to collapse. I should mention that the place that they meet is in front of a very strange buffet that the moon people bring to the Earthlings.
The food that was prepared since before they were born, which I never quite understood what that meant.
I'm not completely certain what that's intended to convey. It's intended to in the script it frightens the Earthlings because they're like, oh, I'm not going to eat 30-year-old food. but I don't know what the characters are supposed to be meaning to say.
I
when
think
they
it's
say that.
that we no longer possess the need nor the facilities to make this, but we think that it would be palatable to Earthlings because we were similar enough at one time. That's really kind of what they're getting at.
Yeah.
In which case, the Earthling, the 30-year-old food, what is this, Twinkies?
Yeah. Julia, you were doing some reading about what it actually was. Oh wait, I think we don't have Julia. Well, as Julia was telling me that actually they are Girl Scout cookies. In fact, some of them.
Yeah,
Right,
sorry.
I remember
I
seeing that.
forgot that was muted.
Yeah.
Yes, some of them were were Girl
Yes.
Scout cookies.
That is crazy. That's I don't know. Maybe Thin Mints would actually last for 30. Who knows? And they don't last that long in my house.
It wasn't Thin Mints though. It was the ones that nobody eats.
Oh really?
Which is why
Oh, like the kind of shortbread ones, or
the
like,
trefoils, yeah. there was like 3 trefoils and 2 others, but I don't think any of them.
which are actually tasty. But when
Yeah, they are.
you
They're
live in a
delicious.
world where there's Samoas, like
Yes.
when there's a
yes.
coconut chocolate thing and a Thin Mint, you're like,
Yep.
come on, I can get what are you doing here?
Yep.
What is this? Cookies at grandma's? Like, you can give me the expensive ones here, the real deal. That's funny though. We did have Girl time, and that was 30 years ago.
So yeah, I don't know how to make. Well, okay, the leader Alpha is trying to take over the Moon organization and keep Steve and tie up the rest to be eaten by the giant spider that they sort of control access to. This is all extremely silly because again, this organization has about 13 people in it, and it's clear, like in the logic of the film, it's clear that they are dying. They need access to Earth. So they need the ship. So I suppose that's what, so they're going to kill everybody else and they're going to keep Steve and they're going to use him to fly back to Earth and I guess relocate there, or even.
And then he also will provide the keys to being, he's an Earthling, and as long as he sits up straight and acts right, he can take advantage of being the servant to the Queen.
Yes. Yes.
Without kind of thinking that any of the other Moon women would think maybe that's not so great. Because she does have her faction, and the undoing is that someone else doesn't think that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah. Well, a young lady falls in love with Lon, and she finally decides that she's going to help them escape. And in the process, after helping them escape, she manages to essentially, I'm paraphrasing because it's hard to remember, but she throws a grenade essentially that blows out a window that in turn destroys the inner atmosphere of their civilization and causes it to collapse like at the end.
That's another thing about this film is that they're always magically producing things like she magically produces this grenade. They magically produce levers, whatever the word is, that raise gates releasing giant monster spiders, moon spiders. What was the other thing that it magically that it did? It was like filled the place with gas or something. There was like magic levers that would do different things that were super toxic for the world. I'm just like, why do you have these in all the rooms?
Yes.
Well, we're not to question the Moon Society.
Yeah.
Like we don't know. It just shows how much we don't know about this Moon Society.
Right. I think you're being a little intolerant towards the Moon Society.
I mean, diamonds don't mean anything, and levers are everywhere, and you have a spider thing that you can unleash on your enemies.
Food.
Yes.
Like, we don't know.
They have 30. Yeah, they save 30-year-old food.
The funny thing is, if I think back to Bride of Frankenstein, there's a lever at the end that the monster pulls and it blows up the castle. And I don't remember if it got any sufficient setup. I know that I was never confused by it. Even as a kid, I'm like, well, yeah, that clearly looks like a lever.
Don't all bad guys have levers that blow up things? Yeah.
Yes. But I don't remember if it actually has any exposition that explains what it is. So Drew, do you remember that?
I unfortunately do not. I just say you go with it. Like this whole movie is like if someone streamed together a bunch of pulp magazine covers and
Yes,
tried to make a plot out of it.
that's a really
And
good way to put that. Yes.
the society, I mean, I'm prepared to, because they're like, oh, you've shut off our artificial gravity or whatever. Like, I'm prepared to go, sure, because one, that's the way the movie is, but two, we aren't seeing this society at its best. We are seeing it this society where everybody's walking around preparing to like backstab each other as they're holding on to like the last
Yeah.
chances of maybe getting off the rock and going to Earth.
Yeah, I mean it's dire, and again, like there's ways to play the tension off that on paper it's a dire situation. They're running out of air. The cave will run out of air eventually.
Yeah.
Whatever systems are there are failing. Their rocket technology got lost, I guess, when Dirk and whoever else he brought with them went to Earth.
Excellent
So
point.
they don't have the means to make a new rocket. The fact that, I mean, they're just hoping Dirk, the whole time they're hoping Dirk comes back, not just for companionship for the Leto, which is kind of his big thing, but also because that's it. If Dirk doesn't come back, goodbye. We don't know how many years that is, but it doesn't sound like long if they don't think of something. So seeing the society in decay and kind of, in a different world where you had a longer running time or, a different director thinking about different things, those would be really heady subjects. You could even see that in a silent film, like, there's could be a metropolis where these things got really dramatic and tension filled. But that's not what this movie is, and it was never meant to be. It's a remake of Catwoman on the Moon. Of the Moon. So like, which, is similar enough because I've watched both of them a few times. But there's ways the flow of the movie doesn't hit on that. Just really sobering reality. Because we're watching in one version colorized, we get a whole modern dance sequence which gets kids into the drive-in, teens into the drive-in.
That was a really wonderful summary, by the way, of Missile to the Moon. I mean, I thought that was really great. Now is the moment when, like at the end of a James Bond movie or something, the place starts falling apart, like at the end of Mysterious Island and anything else, such that everything I watched when I was a kid, trains you as a writer to the way that you're going to wrap up stuff with the main bad guy is somehow or another, something will trigger his entire world to just start falling apart. Like columns will start falling and people in their costumes will just start running back and forth.
I mean, that continues because like that's how the black hole pretty much ends.
Yes. No,
Man's hubris
absolutely.
ends up with the guy getting smashed and all of his creations turning against him. So
well, like I say, every James Bond ends that way. God, even the new James Bond ends that way. That's the crazy thing.
I just had this picture. I think of skits like this where what if that was like the end of your every workday in your office? Like you're leaving at 5 p.m. and then everything starts to shake and like, it's the end of the day.
Well, that's how it was on Mary Poppins, where it's like every day the next door neighbor would shoot off a cannon, and so they had to prepare the house. It'd be like places, everyone, or whatever positions.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Thank you for remembering that. Yes,
but I just picturing the end of your workday being like a super villain layer, and then you come back the next morning, everything's reset.
Yes,
maybe one less coworker because they got pinned by the column. By the Greek column that somehow that's part of your office.
That does sound a whole lot like the sheepdog and the coyote on in the old cartoon. Morning, Frank. Yes, I love those. Okay, so our guys managed to get out. The entire group, who actually survived the landing on the moon, manages to head back towards the ship, except that the unfortunate rapey Gary, his pockets laden with diamonds, is not able to escape the rock monsters who drive him into the sun, which, as Tony said, makes him burn like an ant under a magnifying glass, and the rest of them get in the ship and go home. And that's pretty much it. Let's go back. Is there anything that I've forgotten to bring up? Like anything that we would
Well, there's
be?
all the backstabbing of like the literal backstabbing. I don't know if you talked
Yes.
about that. Did I miss you saying
No,
that?
no. Go ahead.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
literal backstabbing of what was she called? What was her name?
The
Let me go
Lido.
back and look.
Yes.
No, but the
Lido
one
the
who's not
Alpha.
the Lido
The
is
Alpha, who
yes,
is the number
Alpha
one
Alpha.
in command.
backstabs the Lido with again magically produced stabby thing, like
Like
whatever
a
it
hat
was.
pin. She
Yeah, but
you know.
she didn't take it out of her hat, I don't think. Anyway, the point is she kills her, and now she wants to be the Lido, and there's all the drama around that because she's,
Yeah.
you're not supposed to do that.
There's
That's
also
uncool.
another big piece of drama is that Steve and June are engaged, but June is upset that Steve is so busy building a rocket to go to the moon that they haven't had time to get married yet.
And then
this
that falls forward when there's a lot of, hey, why are you talking to all the sexy moon women?
Right.
I'm here too. And
Mhm.
again, like I said, these guys are just
Yeah, even the good ones aren't that great.
even the good ones are not super great because he just plays it off. Like, not only did he not just beat the ever living crap out of Gary and kick him into the sun originally, oops, but he also just kind of like, she's blind. I mean, I'll tell her eventually. And she's like, well, you should really not, like, that's not cool.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I don't know how moon stuff works. And then he gets hypnotized. She's like, you've been hanging around the moon women, these sexy moon women alive. We're just friends. Like, you're my honey. I barely looked at how shapely and hot these women. I mean, not noticing them at all. And how skimpily they're dressed. I mean, I just look at you.
Right.
Like, it's terrible.
Were they even dressed? I mean, didn't they have like cute dresses?
Yeah.
Right. It's true. They've dressed June because she's an Earthling, and a member of the crew. They've dressed her a member of the crew in as much as she's on the ship when it takes off, and she's dressed in like the kind of mechanic's uniform that Michael Myers steals in Halloween. I mean, it's just this big thing.
Well, that's what you wear when you're on a space mission, Jason.
I guess
Come
so.
on.
It's
science.
Well,
Follow the
I mean,
science.
it is their kind of like, I guess they have their suit and then their jumpsuit. I mean,
That's
it
right.
makes sense, but like in a way. But yeah,
Yeah.
his way of going, look, you're the one for me. Don't even worry about all these, hot women. I mean, people I don't notice
Right.
at all.
The Missile to the Moon women are actually credited, I think, as something like I can't remember. They're credited as beauty
Moon
queens
girls,
or
I
something
think,
like that.
is what we usually see.
It is
They're
featuring
beauty
the
queens.
International Beauty Contest winners.
Oh,
Yes.
what?
So in theory, these are all beauty queens who have been cast as background
As the
moon girls.
yeah.
Including I'm blanking on her name from last week's
Sanita
movie.
Pelkey.
Anita
The
Pelkey.
absolutely
Miss New York.
stunning Sanita Pelkey, who has nothing to say. Her part in the Ghost of Dragster Hollow is much more memorable than this one.
Yes, definitely.
She has lines in that one. She's interesting because she's an engineer girl. I mean, that's really cool. And here she's literally
They
just a model.
they just hired her for the way that she filled out satin tights, basically.
Yeah.
Not that I would notice, because June's my girl.
June is all there. Yeah.
I didn't even
don't
notice
want
the moon women,
that
the moon
moon
girls.
love.
Yeah, I don't even notice these moon girls.
You want a wholesome American girl, not any of those moon floozies.
Exactly.
Let me tell you, if you put Sanita Pelkey into a mechanic's jumpsuit, I think she would still probably stand out in a crowd.
It's the typical trope of like, you'll get somebody like, oh no, I've taken my hair. Like, no, it's not just to take your hair down. Like, come on.
Yes.
It's all of that. Yeah.
I still can't quite tell how tall she is, other than that she's real tall. So yes.
Statuesque, as
they
say.
Yeah. Okay. So I want to apologize for being just sort of loopy on this. It's just that the plot is just so like it just moves from one bit to another, and so it's easy to forget and then double back. So I'm sorry. But anyway, all right. I think we should get to final thoughts and anything else that that I might have missed, you're welcome to go back for. But Drew, we talked about Missile to the Moon. Yeah, let's put it this way for final thoughts. Is this something that people should seek out? Like, is there any
I think
contextual
if you
reason to do it? Go ahead.
I think if you like this kind of movie, sure. Like
Yeah.
I enjoy this kind of movie. I enjoyed watching this movie. If you roll your eyes at a lot of the things that we have talked about, then no, you probably shouldn't watch it.
All right. Very good.
I
Yeah.
feel fair. I feel like that's a fair thing to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's exactly, you know exactly what this movie is if you start, if you find it. You're not going to be fooled. You know that this is you called it ray gun gothic, that it's that kind of film. It's made in 1958. Yes. Joya, what about you?
Yeah, same. I think it's silly. I do think that there is, a little bit of a trigger warning as far as the mild, because it's not it's sexual assault, but it's not rape. It's not rape. But that's definitely something that might bother people. And then it's just kind of, don't just come in with low expectations. It's all, but it's fun.
Yeah.
Excellent. Tony?
I mean, I like B movies, and I like seeing again the kernels of the things. Like I like this kind of stuff, and possibly it's because that's what we grew up on monster theater. Like obviously, I'm not as old as would have seen this in the theater, but on UHF channels, this is the kind of pulpy stuff. It was
Yes.
probably cheap to rent or put on TV, and I love it. But if your sensibilities are Solaris or Ad Astra, this may not, serious sci-fi. This probably isn't your thing. But I think if you're stuck around with us long enough, you kind of know either I'm into B movies or I'm gonna skip this one because that is not my jam at all, right?
Yeah.
But I still hold that even the silliest of B movies, most of the time, there's at least a couple of things where somebody slips something in. You're like, that's actually kind of cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of these B movies are things that contemporary directors that we like, or maybe less so the current generation, but definitely the people that they idolize, like they were picking up on this stuff. This is the stuff they were watching when they could. And so even if it's something silly, it leaves that seed of creativity in your head.
Yeah.
And moves forward. Like I remembered this weird. I could barely remember, but there was a rock creature. So somebody does something weird with rock creatures eventually.
Yeah.
It may or may not be better. A lot of times, it probably is in a more contemporary, scary way or whatever. So as a history kind of thing, and but I'm all about this. I've also watched, the women in Catwomen of the Moon. I tend to think of as more kind of in the beatnik kind of look as far as modern dance goes, because they're all in like black unitards.
That's true.
But that kind of progression, you see kind of this is more of the heading towards Star Trek sci-fi in the costuming in this, even though, and they're not that far
it's
apart.
like showgirl-esque in a lot of
Right.
ways.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
And I find that decision in even being remakes, I find that interesting. So I dig it. I'll watch tons of movies like this, and they're kind of breezy, and that's fine.
Excellent. Yeah, we were talking about Matinee at the Bijou earlier, and what I was thinking about was the fact that Matinee at the Bijou, which was a show back in the '80s, and I think it was on PBS.
It was on
And
PBS when I
right,
saw
the way it would work is that they would play a full, a full presentation of a Saturday. So it would, it'd be like 3 or 4 hours long, because they showed cartoons, they showed a newsreel, they showed a serial, they showed a short subject, and then they showed a feature film presentation. That was the package. Pretty cool package. And and if it wasn't really 3 or 4 hours, I mean, it was long. I mean, this was a long show, because it really did literally include all of that. They would include a short film on something, and then the feature film. But what Tony's right. The feature film was usually a straight drama, like Mildred Pierce or something like that. And then, so the serials might be sci-fi, but you wouldn't have like sci-fi like this as a movie. And then, that you had shows like Phantom of the Opry and Elvira that were showing horror. I can't think of anybody that was showing weird random sci-fi of the era.
Well,
I mean, I
we
don't know
had
where
Monster Theater when I was
Hmm.
living in Kerrville.
Yeah.
And that's how I saw Universal horror as well as sci-fi stuff.
Yeah, but so they would show sci-fi stuff? That's very
Yeah,
cool.
and they showed there was at least some. There were random there because there were several different ones. In fact, there was one that showed sci-fi stuff, and I caught it. It was either out of Dallas or Houston or one of those where they actually the presentation bumper was the all of the parade of UFOs from Close Encounters.
Really?
Like they just ripped it out of I'd gotten a clip
Mm.
and I forgot the name of the show, but I
Well, that's
watched it at
pretty
my
neat.
grandparents, and I want to say it was Saturday. It's either Saturday or Sundays, and I want to say it was Saturdays.
Mm.
The reason I say that it's like these fuzzy memories you have. Not to go too
Oh,
far
yes.
into the depths of Tony, but I remember that because of that they would show more sci-fi stuff. But I remember because my grandfather, a very devout Catholic, would close his TV repair shop at noon on Saturdays, and then kind of rest and relax between noon and time to go to mass. And always my TV watching was like, oh, I gotta go to mass with my grandparents. I mean, when you're a kid, you're like, you don't think about what it actually means. But I remember getting that on UHF and that kind of the fact that it had a clip, because again, there was no VCR at the time.
Yeah.
So a clip from Close Encounters was a memorable thing.
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
seen it in the
Absolutely.
theater. So that whatever that package was, whatever that show was, definitely showed sci-fi stuff. But I forgot where it was. It was either Dallas or Houston. It could have been like Waco, but I can't remember.
Well, be that as it may, my impression is that it was harder to find like wackadoo random sci-fi movies.
It wasn't. You weren't going to get it on a traditional like NBC. The three affiliates weren't going to show it, so you had to catch it either on UHF or you had to catch it when they had basically the time period where they had to fill time, which was usually Saturdays or Sundays,
or the 3 p.m. show. The 3 p.m.
Right.
movie before the 5 o'clock news. Yes,
exactly.
yeah, because that's when you'd play Godzilla for a week and what have you. So
like
anyway.
This is such a weird. There's like, hey, okay, old people.
Yes.
What are you even talking about? But it's such a weird, having grown up through that, and now where I can just go immediately right now, go find any of this stuff on YouTube or on Amazon or Tubi. Is wow.
No, you're totally right. Absolutely. All right. So let's get to endorsements, like what you've been listening to, watching, whatever you want to share. Okay, in the genre world, in theory, horror, but so going back up to start with Drew, what do you have to share with us?
I finally got around to seeing Renfield this week, and while I could have done without the sort of cops and robbers subplot that's kind of grafted in there and feels more kind of studio mandate about it, I did really enjoy it. In particular, I think Nicolas Cage makes for a very fun it's interesting because in a lot of respects he is the most classic movie Dracula I think we've had in a long time, because there's bits of Christopher Lee, there's bits of Bela Lugosi, a lot of Count Yorga, actually, particularly his wardrobe at times. But he's also just really nasty and evil, and that's more how I tend to prefer Dracula to be anyway. But he's very committed to the part, and it really shows, because it's the way I've been describing it to people is that it's a like if we were gonna say use the 5-star rating, it is a 3-star movie with 1 5-star performance in it, because he's just so terrific. And I'm kind of bummed that it didn't do well at the box office, because I'm worried that Universal's gonna take the wrong things from it, because
is that true? It didn't do well?
Oh yeah. I truly believe that if this had been a slightly lower budget movie, it would have been a sleeper hit. I think that because they found the necessity to add so many like action movie elements, which I have to say, even though I'm kind of criticizing that part of the movie, on a technical level, all of the fight scenes are terrific. Like they're very kinetic and very interesting to watch. But I think if you had cut back on some of that stuff, You could have had a lower budget movie that would have been, a profitable movie the way The Invisible Man was a few years ago. Like, I think that they didn't take the right lessons from that, which is, maybe don't make a $100 million Dracula movie,
Wow, that's so interesting.
but what's really interesting to me about it is it's the online Universal Monsters fandom seems to be embracing it though, and that's interesting to me because they usually hate everything. So but that's the thing. There is clearly a lot of love for the Todd Browning, Bela Lugosi Dracula in it. So I think that's part of what worked about it for me, and I think part of it that's working for it for this is a movie that's eventually going to find its audience. It's just unfortunate that it's not in the theaters when it counts most. But no pun intended there. But totally worth seeing if for Nicolas Cage, if nothing else. He's the most memorable Dracula I've seen in a very long time. As an aside, not related to Renfield at all, but Joe Bob Briggs is back, and while I'm not completely up to date on all the episodes yet, the Fulci double feature that he did as the season opener, chef's kiss, so good. Like I loved it. Particularly Zombie, which is probably my favorite Fulci movie. I know that's the more meat and potatoes one, but I love it. But great guests, great commentary on the film itself. Really worth watching if you're aficionado of Italian horror or zombie movies, or just like horror movies. So those are my endorsements this week.
That's great. Thank you very much. Julia, what do you got?
I started out saying genre and preferably horror, but I've only been watching non-genre.
Well, what's the best of that?
I've been catching up on the new season of Ted Lasso because I hadn't re-upped my Apple TV, and it's so funny and sweet, and all the characters are just so well developed, and they're interesting, and I just really enjoy it a lot. I think it's super well written. So that's mine.
That's really fantastic. Tony, what about you?
See, I will agree with Renfield. I think tonally it's a little all over the map, but there's a lot of love for the Universal Dracula, and that's really cool. The fight scenes are definitely over the top in really great ways. But yeah, I thought that was solid. Again, I mentioned earlier Sisu, which has to be seen to be believed. It's ended up being a very cathartic smash all of the Nazis, which not enough Nazis and neo-Nazis, in my opinion, get their comeuppance in real life. So I found it to be very cathartic with a crowd who are ready to see a person pushed to the brink, kind of a World War II superhero in similar ways. People have, said like John Wick, but only in the sense of he's an unstoppable machine of destruction. And there's more to it than that, but that I found I really I really hope it does well. I liked the director's previous stuff. Rare Exports is also a favorite of mine.
Oh, it's I see. I didn't even know it was the Rare Export.
Yeah.
Rare Exports director. That's awesome.
And the reality of the situation that happened in Finland, being torn apart by Russia, and then having to work with Russia to fight the Nazis, and I mean the reality of World War II in Finland was really terrible. But kind of seeing this cathartic, rip it all up kind of action version of that was something else. I've also really been enjoying Mrs. Davis, which
so
feels
good.
like a comic book, but it wasn't a comic book. But it feels like it's shot like a comic book adaptation in way. If you see it, I think you would understand. I had to look it up because I'm like, surely this is a comic the way it feels. And there's a lot to it. I hope that it sticks the landing, but it's pretty darn good. And then we've also been starting to watch Sweet Tooth too.
Between Mrs. Davis and Watchmen, I am starting to think that Daniel Lindoff might have a nun fetish.
There's something possibly.
Just saying.
Yeah, there's a lot. It goes. I mean, this show definitely goes. It doesn't ever go where I think it's gonna go.
It is very bonkers.
And that can go again. That's why I'm cautiously optimistic, because when you're that kinetic, sometimes it can be hard to stick the landing. But I'm hoping that it does. But it's pretty great. But yeah, there's a lot out there to see that's really good right now. So there's something for everyone.
There's so much. There's so much. I mean, I got back today from traveling, hanging out with Julia, and I watched the whole season of Ted Lasso. But even if I didn't want to do that, there's a whole season now of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel to catch up on.
Oh yeah, we were watching that.
There's just so much.
Yeah.
There's more content than you could. It is. You know what's coming this week? Fatal Attraction with Joshua Jackson and Lizzie Kaplan, which is going to be bonkers.
They've made Fatal Attraction into a TV show. Like I'm already like scratching my head that they made Dead Ringers into.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating.
So that's
me
here.
Too. I haven't caught that yet, but the original is something else. So I'm
yeah.
I think there is truly no IP left unturned right now.
Yeah. Tony, thank you. So for me, two things to note. There is a podcast that you must go and listen to. So you must remember this by Karina Longworth is back.
What's it called?
It is called.
Just kidding. No, I was a joke again.
Oh, you must
bad joke.
I thought you yes.
There's another bad joke.
The new season is called Erotic 90s. So they're touching on stuff like I mean, what shows up in the 90s? Basic Instinct, Indecent Proposal, just lots of, and all of the knockoffs of Fatal Attraction. It is a super, super fun topic by literally one of the best in the business. I mean, Karina Longworth, just in my mind, just can do no wrong with how much she researches her topics and discusses them. It takes her a long time to prepare these seasons, and then she rolls them out. So it is so cool, and I'm just super stoked. And they've been coming out for like the past several weeks, but I've only started listening to them now. So that's another thing. I've got like 8 hours of this show to listen to that where do people find the time to ingest all of their content? And I got one more.
She's married to director
Ryan Johnson. She's married to Ryan Johnson, yes, which is just the weirdest thing. Yes. So this writer, who is one of the best observers of pop culture and its history, is also married to the creator of The Glass Onion. So that's a power couple right there. Also, Catherine Coldiron's junk film "Why Bad Movies Matter" from Castle Ridge Media comes out on Tuesday, May 2nd. So you should check that out. It is really going to be neat. There's a trailer. Look for it on YouTube. It looks really good. I can't wait for people to see this book. So that's it. All right, we will be back, I presume, soon, if not next week. And I think it might be. I don't remember if it's time for Scream or for something else. So we'll discuss it and we'll get back to you. But thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time and attention. Go check out Missile to the Moon, actually, after listening to this or before listening to this, or even just playing it while you're listening to us. Whatever works for you. And
once again, we've spoken longer than the movie is, so there you go.
Yes. Yeah.
Not very hard with this film, though.
That's absolutely true. All right. I'll see you guys soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Night.